They told you money was just a tool, something neutral, something you could wield. But if that were true, why does it feel like it wields you? Every morning you wake up, not because you're rested, not because you're excited, but because a machine buzzes beside your bed. You hit snooze, drag yourself out, and dive into traffic. Not chasing passion, chasing payment. You scarf down meals without tasting them, speak words you don't really mean, and lie awake at night while your mind runs endless calculations. Not because you're greedy, but because you're just trying to make it. Because in this world, survival has become a full-time job. We like to say money doesn't control us. But take a closer look. Your alarm clock, your commute, your inbox, your arguments, your dinner plans, your stress, your relationships, even your health. They all orbit around one thing, not your dreams, not your soul, not your peace, but your bank account. Its balance quietly dictates your decisions, your emotions, your sense of worth. And the most dangerous part, it feels normal. We live in a world where money doesn't just buy stuff, it buys dignity, it buys attention, it buys rest. It decides who gets to be heard and who gets left behind. But nobody really asks the cost of keeping up with that game. We weren't born obsessed with money, we were taught to be, trained to chase it, programmed to believe it's the answer, when in reality it's become the question we're too scared to even ask. How much is enough? What are you giving up for that next dollar? Your time, your sanity, your freedom, or worse, yourself. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You may leave this life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." But most of us, we're not guided by that truth. We're not living like today could be our last. We're living like our debt might be. That's the illusion, money as a tool. When in reality, for many of us, it's become a religion, one we worship through our attention, our sacrifices, our daily choices. We bow to it with every job we loathe but keep, every moment we miss with loved ones to answer one more email, every time we mute our truth to stay safe, stay employed, stay on track. This isn't about hating money, it's about waking up to what it's become. Because when a number in an app determines your sense of self, when the chase for more drowns out the pursuit of meaning, something's broken. Not just in the system, but in how we see ourselves. Because if your life is being driven by something you don't truly control, can you really call it your life? Here's the truth, most people aren't chasing wealth, they're running from fear. Fear of being left behind, fear of not being enough, fear of falling out of the game. But what if the game is rigged? What if it was never about making enough, but making sure you never feel like you are? Because if they can keep you striving, they can keep you spending. And if they can keep you spending, they can keep you scared. And if you're scared, you won't stop long enough to ask the question that could change everything. Why am I doing any of this? This world tells you that money is safety, that control is peace, that just surviving means you're succeeding. But Marcus Aurelius saw through that. He saw the trap, and he left us with the reminder we keep ignoring. You may leave this life at any moment. So why let your checking account decide how you live it? The real tragedy isn't that money matters. It's that we've let it matter more than everything else, more than truth, more than presence, more than connection. Slowly, silently, we trade the most sacred parts of who we are for the illusion that someday we'll have enough to finally start living. But someday never comes, because we were never taught how to live, only how to earn. Honestly, money by itself is nothing. It's paper, metal, digits on a screen. It doesn't have a soul, it doesn't have values, it doesn't care. But society gave it meaning. Over time, it stopped being a tool and started being a scoreboard. We began to see it not just as a resource, but as a reflection of character. If you had it, you were smart, capable, worth listening to. If you didn't, you were lazy, irresponsible, invisible. That belief doesn't come from truth, it comes from design, because a system that equates wealth with virtue keeps you running and obedient. At some point, we stopped asking what kind of person someone was and started asking what they make. In that tiny shift, money didn't just become moral, it became meaning. Simply rich meant right. Poor meant failure. Simple meant giving up. Wealth became the ultimate proof that you were doing life, quote, correctly. According to a 2022 study by Pew Research, 61% of Americans believe a person's value is tied to their ability to earn. Not their kindness, not their wisdom, not their principles, their paycheck. That belief infects everything. A brilliant teacher working 2 jobs is just getting by. A hedge fund manager exploiting loopholes? Genius. A parent who chooses time with their kids over the corporate ladder? Unambitious. An artist, a thinker, a writer. If they're not monetizing it, it's just a hobby. But Marcus Aurelius reminded us, if someone despises me, that's their problem. My only concern is not doing or saying anything deserving of contempt. Translation: your job isn't to impress the world, it's to stay true to yourself. But try telling that to a culture that tracks worth in digits. A culture where income equals insight, where purpose is measured in profits. In that world, the things that matter most, empathy, creativity, presence, are too quiet to be counted. When we stop believing in anything deeper, money fills the void. It becomes the North Star, the moral compass, the definition of success. And in that vacuum, something tragic happens. People stop living honest lives. Instead, they chase the appearance of success. They sacrifice what they love for what pays. They mute their real selves to fit what sells. They trade meaning for marketability. But the real tragedy? It's not just that money holds so much power. It's that we've handed it moral authority. We let it define who matters, who wins, who gets heard. And we never stop to ask, what if we've been measuring everything by the wrong scale? Because let's be honest, character can't be bought, wisdom can't be deposited, and integrity doesn't show up on a credit report. But when wealth becomes your compass, you stop asking who you're becoming. Calm and start asking only what kind of deal you can close. That's the trade, soul for status. It's a system that rewards the external, the visible, the loud, the monetized, and ignores the internal. Until one day you might wake up with everything you were told to want and feel like a stranger to yourself. Because it doesn't stop at how we judge others. It cuts deeper into how we measure ourselves. You tell yourself you're not chasing money, you just want enough. Enough to breathe, enough to rest, enough to finally feel safe. But here's the trap. Enough is a moving target. Every time you think you're close, it moves. You get the raise, now the house feels too small. You pay off the car, now the new model looks better. You're making more than you ever have and still feel behind. Why? Because you've been conditioned, not to feel abundance, but to feel lack. There's a name for this, the hedonic treadmill. It's a concept from behavioral psychology. The idea is simple. As your income increases, your expectations rise with it. So no matter how much you earn, your happiness resets. You adapt, you want more, and the treadmill speeds up. You run faster, buy bigger, climb higher, and still feel just as anxious, just as empty. That's not a glitch. That's the system working exactly as it was designed. Because a content person is hard to manipulate, but a person who always feels slightly behind, that person keeps spending, keeps striving, keeps fueling the machine. From the second you wake up, the world reminds you of what you lack. Ads show you what you don't own. Social media shows you who you're not. Productivity culture whispers, you haven't done enough. Even the success stories you see, they're not there to inspire. They're there to exhaust you, to keep you sprinting toward a version of life that looks full, but feels hollow. We've replaced needs with cravings, security with status, sufficiency with ambition, and we call that progress. But Marcus Aurelius warned us centuries ago, a limit to your desires means a limit to your... In other words, if you want peace, you have to know where to stop. But who's teaching that? Where's the class on contentment? Where's the instruction manual for saying, this is enough? You won't find it, because contentment doesn't sell. So instead, we're taught to apologize for wanting less, to feel ashamed for choosing simplicity, to see quiet joy as a lack of ambition. But maybe it's the most radical act of all, to step off the treadmill, to say no to the chase, to reclaim your own pace. Because here's the truth no one's selling. No number will ever make you feel complete if you've been trained to feel incomplete. No lifestyle will ever satisfy if you've been conditioned to keep upgrading. The system whispers, more is better, but your soul is asking something else. What's the cost? What are you giving up in this race? Your time, your health, your presence, your relationships, yourself? And when the treadmill finally stops, when the noise fades, will you even recognize the person you've become? Because you might be richer than ever and still not feel whole. So the question isn't, do you have enough? The deeper question is, do you even know what enough feels like anymore? The cost of always chasing more isn't just financial, it's existential. Because the longer you run towards some distant financial goal, the further you drift from right now. You don't live today, you endure it. You treat the present like a toll booth on the way to your real life. You say, once I hit that number, once I buy that house, once I finally feel secure, but security never arrives. And in the meantime, something sacred starts to fade, your ability to be here. You become a ghost in your own life. You're at dinner, but your mind's on budgets. You're on vacation, but you're checking your email. You're with your kids, but your thoughts are replaying financial what-ifs on a loop. And the longer you live like that, the more disconnected you become. Not just from others, but from yourself. This isn't just poetic, it's biological. Studies show that when the brain is under constant financial stress, the amygdala, the part responsible for fear and threat detection, becomes hyperactive. That means your nervous system stays locked in low-level fight or flight, always scanning, always bracing, and that vigilance comes at a cost. Because under financial stress, activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for empathy, long-term thinking, focus, and moral clarity, actually shrinks. So the more you worry about money, the harder it becomes to connect, to concentrate, to act with wisdom. In other words, your bank account may be growing, but your capacity to live well is quietly shrinking. You become more reactive, less present, more efficient, less human. Richer in numbers, poorer in spirit. And here's the cruel irony. The very thing you're trying to earn more of, peace, freedom, fulfillment, is the very thing being drained by how you're earning it. Because you've been sold a lie, that life happens later, that if you sacrifice now, you'll be happy then. But later just becomes another word for never. You weren't built to live in a hypothetical future. You were built for presence, for wonder, for connection, for now. But when money becomes your lens, everything else blurs. Beauty fades into the background. Silence feels uncomfortable. Stillness is mistaken for laziness. And before you even realize it, you've become a stranger in your own existence. Always scanning forward, always just out of reach. Marcus Aurelius warned us about this trap centuries ago. Don't waste what's left of your life in guessing other people's souls instead of attending to your own. But that's exactly what we do. We trade inner clarity for outer comparison. We neglect the soul for the scoreboard. We let numbers and spreadsheets dictate how life feels. And the worst part? We call that being responsible. But real responsibility doesn't start with grinding harder. It starts with presence, with the courage to stop and ask, is this moment worthy of the life I'm trading for it? Because in the end, your life won't be measured by net worth. It will be measured by awareness, by connection, by how fully you inhabited the moments you were given. So the question isn't, how much do you have? The real question is, how much of you is still here? You were told money was just a tool, something you used to build a life. But somewhere along the way, the roles reversed. You don't use money anymore. It uses you. You plan your week around it. You filter your values through it. You say yes to things you hate and no to things you love. Because of it, you sacrifice time, truth, peace, not for joy, not for meaning, but for income. And maybe the most dangerous part, you call it normal. You call it stability. But be honest, how many people stay in jobs that drain them just to keep the paycheck? How many agree to projects that compromise their values because the bonus is too big to walk away from? How many bite their tongues, suppress their truth, because truth pays less than compliance? We tell ourselves we're in control, but if you can't say no, are you really free? If your choices are shaped by fear, fear of losing status, or security, or salary, then who's really making the decisions? You or your bank account? Marcus Aurelius put it plainly. He who is not free from desire is a slave, even if he is an emperor. In other words, if your inner compass is guided by wanting, chasing, craving, you're not the master, you're the servant. And today, money isn't just a desire, it's the desire that shapes all the others. It tells you what's worth your time, what's worth your energy, what's worth your life.
It whispers just a little more.
Even when it already has everything. That's not freedom. That's bondage in a business suit. And let's be clear, this isn't about yachts and private jets. Most people aren't chasing luxury. They're chasing the ability to breathe. They just want to sleep at night, to feel like they matter, to stop worrying. That's what makes the system so powerful. It doesn't prey on greed, it preys on fear. It wears the mask of necessity. But when necessity becomes an excuse for self-betrayal, we're not surviving anymore. We're surrendering. You weren't born to trade your soul for a salary. You weren't meant to outsource your values to the market. And yet most people do it every single day because they think they have no choice. But that's the lie. The lie is that money is neutral, that it doesn't care what you do to get it. But you care. Your conscience cares. Your soul cares. And every time you betray what you believe in just to protect what you've earned, a part of you goes quiet until eventually you can't hear yourself at all. That's what the system wants. Not creativity, not rebellion, not independence. It wants you obedient, predictable, scared. Because a person who fears losing income is easy to control. But a person who knows how to walk away, that person is powerful. Because freedom doesn't come from having more, it comes from needing less. It's about knowing when to say, this isn't worth it, even when the paycheck says otherwise. So ask yourself, are you working toward the life you want, or just trying not to lose the one you've built? Because if you're too afraid to pause, too entangled to walk away, too dependent to tell the truth, then money doesn't serve you, it owns you. And that's not success. That's servitude, dressed up as responsibility. So the real question isn't how much do I make? It's this, how much of myself have I given up to make it? Where does that leave you? If money was never supposed to be your master, if enough keeps shifting, if presence has been traded for pursuit, and security has been used to sell servitude, then what now? What does real freedom actually look like? The Stoics had an answer. Not fantasy, not escape, clarity. Freedom, they said, isn't about how much you accumulate, it's about how much you control, and not control over markets or recessions or inflation, because you can't control any of that. You can't predict interest rates. You can't guarantee returns. You can't out-strategize chaos. But there's one thing you can control: yourself. You can define what's truly enough for you. You can decide what success means, not by income, but by alignment. You can live by principle, not pressure. Because Stoicism isn't about apathy. It's not pretending money doesn't matter. It's about knowing what matters. Each morning, ask yourself, if today were my last, would I still use money to do this? Would I still take that job? Still say yes to that deal? Still chase that status? Still delay that dream? Or would I slow down, simplify, and live like this moment, this one right in front of me, is already enough, because it is. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most radical thing you can do in a system built on more. To opt out of the chase. Not in rebellion, but with intention. To draw a hard line between what you need and what you've only been told to want. To stop expanding your lifestyle with every raise. To stop inflating your worth with every purchase. To stop believing the lie that your value rises with your income, because it doesn't. And it never did. Marcus Aurelius said it best, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. That's not weakness, that's power. The kind of power no recession, no market crash, no algorithm can take from you. Because when your peace no longer depends on profit, When your joy isn't held hostage by your next paycheck, when your identity is rooted in values, not valuations, you become unshakable. Yes, the world will still pull at you. The ads will still whisper. The culture will still tell you to climb, to grow, to upgrade. But inside, you'll know. You were never meant to be a number, or a role, or a price tag. You were meant to live, fully, freely, presently. And the path to that life doesn't start with more, it starts with less. Less noise, less craving, less fear, more clarity, more presence, more soul. Because true freedom, it has nothing to do with how much you own, and everything to do with how little owns you. It's not the economy you need to master, it's your mind. It's not the market you need to outwit, it's your priorities. It's not the future you need to control, it's the courage to live right now. So no, you don't have to quit your job. You don't have to sell your house. You don't have to disappear from the world. You just have to retire from the lie that money gives you freedom. Because the truth is, freedom begins the moment you stop trying to buy it and start remembering you were born with it. You were born free, before the metrics, before the scoreboards, before the pressure. You knew how to be present. You knew how to wonder. You knew how to be. And you can return to that place, not by escaping life, but by redefining it. By refusing to equate your worth with your wealth. By rejecting the myth that endless growth equals success. By choosing a standard of living that serves your soul, not society's story. That might look different for you than for anyone else. It might mean working fewer hours and earning less, but being more alive. It might mean letting go of titles for more time with your children. It might mean saying no to promotions, deals. It might mean having less stuff, but more space to breathe. That's not settling, that's clarity. That's the courage to define your life from the inside out, instead of letting the world shape it from the outside in. Marcus Aurelius lived in a palace, but his wisdom came from restraint, from discipline, from choosing principle over pressure. He understood something we still struggle with, that real power comes not from adding more, but from needing less. So today, in a world that trains you to chase, to compare, to consume, what if you chose something different? What if you paused, even for a moment, and asked, what is this all costing me? Not in dollars, but in time, in energy, in joy, in presence. Because if the answer is your peace, if the answer is your relationships, if the answer is your soul, then maybe it's time to stop. Not give up, but wake up. And realize, you were never meant to spend your one and only life on a treadmill someone else built. You were meant to step off, to look around, to take a breath, and to decide finally, for yourself, what matters, not what sells, not what trends, not what impresses, what matters. Because if you don't decide, the world will decide for you, and it will choose money every time. But now, you know better. You've seen the game. You've felt its weight. You've questioned the cost. And that means you can begin, maybe for the first time, to live by your own design. To build not just a living, but a life. One rooted not in fear, but in freedom.